Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. We are into the final weekend of the season. I know this is Thursday when you're listening to this, but we're heading into the final weekend of the season. And where the fuck did the time go? Where did it go? I'd like a VAR review to find out where the time has gone. Yes, I realize the outcome would be ultimately unsatisfactory and take even more time, but fucking hell. It really doesn't seem like that long ago when we were back in August talking about the season that lies ahead, all the promise, all the potential, all the things that might happen, what we could achieve. Could we get better? Could we improve? Could we go the distance in the title race this time around? The answer, I think, to all of those questions is yes. Of course, there is one big question unresolved to be decided on Sunday, of course. And look, I think, most people would have Manchester City as favourites for the title at this point. They just have to win a home game against West Ham, a West Ham side, by the way, that have not kept a clean sheet in their last 17 Premier League games. David Moyes is leaving. He said his goodbyes to the West Ham fans at the London Stadium last weekend. And City, as we know, are just this relentless winning machine. They haven't lost a game since December in the Premier League. So you would have to say the odds are pretty much stacked in their favour. Nevertheless, we are here. We're in it. It is the final day. We have pushed them as hard as we can, I think, and this team deserves a huge amount of credit, a huge amount of goodwill and love from the Arsenal fans for what they've done and what they've produced over the course of this season. There are always going to be things that you look back on and you think, if only this, if only that, but titles are decided over the course of 38 games, and I think for the most part, this has been a really fun, enjoyable campaign, and one, I hope, that ultimately has a little twist at the end, like if the Premier League season was written by the guy who did The Sixth Sense.
I see dead people.
Turns out Pep doesn't know he's dead, or something, and Arsenal are Premier League champions. It's a bit of a long shot, I'll grant you, but you never know. Anyway, let's see what happens. We'll talk a bit about that in due course on today's show. We'll be talking to Tim Stillman in a minute about, this week and what lies ahead and the final day. We'll also be talking to Tim about Vivianne Miedema, who is leaving Arsenal after 7 years, one of the greatest players in the history of Arsenal women. So we'll talk to Tim about that situation and about her time at the club and much more. We'll also give you a chance to win a book a little bit later on, published by Legends Publishing. It's called Is Yours Gold? The Arsenal Invincibles 20th Anniversary. Looking back on, I think you can probably figure that one out. It's written by Darren Berry. We'll have a copy of that for you to give away with a couple of badges too. So do stay tuned for that. Now though, let's just get on with the show. And it is my pleasure to welcome back Tim Stillman. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
I mean, some time has passed since Tuesday night when we had, I don't know if it was misplaced hope in what Tottenham might be able to do against Manchester City, and ultimately they didn't do it, which, it's quite funny in that Spurs winning that game would have been the Spursiest thing of all time, but Spurs losing it is also the Spursiest thing of all time. I don't know, they're like Schrodinger's fucking football team in some respects. I know you wrote a little piece about this in the Standard, but I'm sort of curious about how you view this situation which has developed. Tottenham manager Ange Postecoglou has, he's made some comments after the game. He made some comments before the game. He made some comments after the game. And it's clear that, not for the first time, a Tottenham manager is having some issues with Tottenham, just Tottenham themselves. Like, the rivalry thing, I think we can discuss, like, what would it be like if the shoe was on the other foot? We can delve into some, like, ridiculous fiction that Tottenham might be in a title race until the final day, if we really want to. But where I'm sort of more interested in going here is about, should a manager care? should a manager care about what the fans think about what happens to their team when his job is to get results and to win football matches? Does that trump every other aspect of being at a particular football club, whether it's Tottenham or Real Madrid or Barcelona or anything else? Is that something he has to pay any attention to, or should he be perfectly entitled to say, hey, my job is to win every game that I'm in charge of. We haven't won enough games this season. I want to win this one, and it doesn't matter to me what the consequences for another team might be.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, there's so many angles to this. Like, on one hand, I don't think anyone should moralise to fans about what they do and don't want. Like, if you want to turn up and want your team to lose, I think you should be perfectly entitled to do that. You pay your money, you take your choice and all of that. Speaking as objectively as I can, I don't judge a single Tottenham fan for thinking that way, because I think I'd think that way. I don't think I'd go as far as doing the Poznan or outwardly cheering or anything like that. I am interested to know what my kind of reaction would be to an Arsenal attack, because I think it's so much in your muscle memory to go on, complain about a bad decision. I think it'd be very difficult to get rid of that. But there was a much more levity in the atmosphere when Man City scored. And I think once it starts happening, particularly against a team like City, where once you're 1-0 down, you kind of know it's over anyway, you can kind of go, okay, this is what's going to happen. I think in Tottenham's situation as well, even winning wouldn't have put fourth place in their hands. They still would have been 2 points behind. So I think there's that to it as well. And it isn't like they've never finished fourth before. So I don't necessarily judge them for wanting that. At the same time, I do think as Arsenal fans, we should mock them for that as well, because it's sports fandom, and take the joy out of it where you can. So Tottenham fans, take the joy out of the fact that, yes, you didn't help Arsenal to win the league. Arsenal fans, by all means, fill your boots and have a go at Tottenham fans and call them small time and all of that. And I don't like the kind of the moralising and equivocating towards fans and stuff like that. But then, like, the manager's angle, that's even more interesting, because on one hand, I think Postecoglou did say later in the press conference, he said something like, we've scored a lot of late goals this season at home, and a lot of that's been about the atmosphere, and the atmosphere wasn't there, and it wasn't. It was weird. It was like a Man City home game. That's what the atmosphere tends to be like at the Etihad. And so it probably would have been strange for the players. And I do think it's dicey territory to get in, to start kind of taking pot shots at your own fans. I never thought for a second that the players would throw the game or anything like that. They'll all have nice little bonuses in their contracts. Sure. If they finish fourth. And Son Heung-min is 31 years old. I'm sure he wants to play in the Champions League again. He's not going to have many other chances, particularly if he stays at Spurs. So, stuff like that. But at the same time, I think it was Haters TV put together like a nice little compilation of basically Mourinho, Conte and Postecoglou all kind of saying the same thing, that, particularly Conte as well. He went really two-footed on the, to paraphrase, this club are an embarrassing bunch of losers. Which is kind of what I think Postecoglou was driving at as well. I take more of a pinch of salt with Mourinho because, that's like, whose side am I going to take there? That's the devil in the deep blue sea right there. But, there is, I do get it from Postecoglou's perspective in that, probably a bit like Arteta, he's trying to completely reverse this culture at Spurs, where it's like, we've all got to be ruthless, we've all got to be very focused. But at the same time, he did say a few weeks ago that he wasn't particularly bothered, but not that he wasn't particularly bothered about fourth, but he was kind of saying, I'd rather see the progress of the team. And they didn't play badly, and you know what, they lost to Man City, welcome to the club kind of thing. Like, they didn't play badly, so I don't, and they played a lot better than they've been playing recently, so maybe he got the progress thing. So I think it's so multifaceted, but at the end of the day, my position is, let's laugh at Tottenham fans and let's laugh at the fact that Ange Postecoglou has, to paraphrase him ever so slightly, called them all an embarrassing bunch of losers.
Yes, and the guy with the trumpet at the top of the toilet duct should be up there playing Beck loser. That's what he should be doing, not when the Saints go marching in. But I really do. I honestly think it is fascinating because, the through line you mention is, serious managers. Whatever you think about Jose Mourinho, a serious manager and a guy who won a lot in his career and also won things, against the odds to a certain extent, like with Porto winning the Champions League. That game I think about with Inter and when they went to Barcelona and dug in and got a result, it was against the odds. And certainly you would have to say winning anything with Tottenham would be against the odds. Conte just, had clearly had enough with what went on inside that football club, not just the fans, not just the players, the owners, whatever it is. Like he got to a point where he had enough and said, this football club is not a serious football club. If they want to win anything, something has to change. Why haven't they won anything? Ask the chairman, whatever it was. And things have been going pretty well for Postecoglou. He's a sort of amiable guy, I'm sure, easy to connect with if you're a Tottenham fan. When things are going well, I suppose. But, they had been going quite well. And now, those comments that you mentioned about, we got a late goal here and there this season because the fans were behind us and they were urging the team on and pushing the team forward. And I obviously don't want Tottenham to be good. I don't want them to be better. Nobody listening to this wants them to be better. But I do think there is a point being made by these guys that is almost irrefutable when you're talking about how a football club progresses, because, we've seen it at Arsenal. We've seen what you need to do at Arsenal in order to change a culture, in order to change, a club being in a situation where it looks like they can't do anything and all of a sudden you're building something. And Arteta, from day one, and it's weird because of what happened with COVID and there were no fans for so long and it was very hard to implement. But from day one, talked about connecting with the fans, connecting with the supporters, our people. We want to be there with our fans. We want to, connect. And there's no question in my mind that it has had an impact. 97.4 whatever % of it is about what he's done tactically, the quality of the players he's brought in. Intangibles, I think, are a small percentage of what happens and how things come to pass. But there's no question in my mind that connection between the fans and the team and the club again. It gives you time, it gives you breathing space, it gives you a little goodwill when things don't go quite as well as you want. All of those things are important when you are trying to build something. And from what I'm seeing, and it's not like I follow a load of Tottenham fans, but I have been looking around a bit today, and a load of them are like, well, this fucking Aussie guy can fuck off. Where was all this anger after we lost 4 games in a row, including to Chelsea, which I get. But what do you want? Do you want the progress, or are you happy enough just being, miserable, spiteful little twats? That's really interesting as well about communication and things like that. Not least because I think Postecoglou has managed to strike a chord more widely, generally speaking, and I think a lot of that is. Frankly, there are sections of the mainstream media who are just very impressed by being called mate quite a lot. And it has really been that easy, rattling your keys at a toddler type thing. But whereas Arteta, I don't think has connected beyond the Arsenal fan base, because you watch his press conferences. I've been in a lot of his press concences. They're not laugh a minute. They're perfunctory, aren't they? Yeah, he's there to do a job, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, but the thing is with Arteta's communication to us as Arsenal fans, I think has been crystal clear from day one. And I really like how old clips have kind of resurfaced recently. So there's ones I love, after we beat Liverpool during lockdown, and he does that whole, he could have done a little kind of dance and taken a lap of honour. We beat Liverpool. We beat them like a championship team, winning a cup game. But he never And you listen to Ten Hag at the moment, who is, pissing on people's backs and telling them it's raining. So for Arteta to come out after that and say the gap between these teams is enormous, this is not how I want to play, but the effort's there, the accountability's there, we'll get to the rest. Like, that's a really positive thing to say. And the other clip I love is, I think, when we're going through the really bad period in kind of late 2020, and it's a pre-match press conference, and obviously all of the questions are different flavours of why are Arsenal so crap at the moment. And he does that thing where, obviously it's all on Zoom at the time, where he pats his chest and he goes, "Hit me, I'm here.
Yeah.
It's not good enough, I'm here." And like, he wasn't making excuses like I think a lot of other managers would or have in those scenarios. So I think that stuff is more useful in hindsight. So to your point, we lost 4th to Tottenham 2 seasons ago in incredibly painful circumstances.
Yeah.
That was very unpleasant. I went to a North London derby and I left on 65 minutes. I've never done that before, and I never want to do it again, when we lost 3-0. That stuff, and it brings me back to Arteta's quote when he very first had joined, and he said something about when the tree shakes, you need to understand the kind of the principle. I think that's what happened at the end of that season. We missed, like, people could have turned about that. People could have got very angry about throwing away 4th to Tottenham, but they didn't, I don't think. I think Arsenal fans were like, no, we can see there's something brewing here. We can see the progress. And of course, yes, that's mainly on the pitch. But I do think a lot of that is the quality of Arteta's communication to Arsenal fans. And I do think that for us, particularly coming on the back of Emery, for whom communication was an issue, not entirely his fault, having that clarity has really helped us at different points to go, no, we can see what you're doing and what you're saying. And I think Postecoglou, it's interesting that I do think maybe he has got the credit in the bank at the moment to turn guns on his own fans, but he's not going to have that for very long, basically.
No, I don't think so. And it was quite striking to see some videos of him, beefing with the fans in the stadium because there's a guy behind him telling him to throw the game. And I think even if you I think the rivalry of, that fans have is obviously very different from managers and people inside the game as well. A lot of the time what we feel as fans is not really felt the same way by players, by managers, by coaches, executives. This is a game, but this is their job and this is their life, and they can compartmentalize things an awful lot better. But, him beefing with fans and, it doesn't really augur well. But, when you go back to that, it is quite striking, isn't it, that the clarity of communication has been, like you say, there from day one. And it's not as if in the period since Mikel Arteta took over that he hasn't had his critics, that he hasn't had his doubters, that he hasn't had people who say, well, this is not good enough, it's time to go. Clearly, those were issues that we were dealing with at various times throughout his tenure. But, I think you could look at what he said, what he wanted to do, and the fact that you can sort of fast forward from those press conference moments or those interviews, or we've referenced this before, go back to his first interview when he took over and look at what he said and look at what's happened. Like, that gives you the credit in the bank, that gives you the goodwill. And even going back to that night where we lost at White Hart Lane, where we completely ran out of steam, where we didn't get top 4, and it was painful. And it was a moment, I think, where a lot of people, maybe not all Arsenal fans, because I'm sure there are Arsenal fans who were doubters, but I think a lot of people who cover the game in a kind of surface way, right, where your job is to talk about every football club, to talk about every team in the Premier League. They looked at Arsenal and said, that was their chance. That was it. Like, it's gone now. Fair play. They got that far, but that's kind of it now. And Tottenham are in the Champions League and, the balance of power and blah, blah, blah. And the next season, Arsenal did something extraordinary and it didn't finish the way we wanted. And everyone said, well, that's it now. That was their chance. They should have done it. And here we are another season later, heading into the final day, and we'll come to that. But again, if it doesn't happen, people will probably say, well, that was it. That was their chance. They should have done it this season. But, but every year it's a question of we're seeing a team that learns. It's like some kind of organism that sucks up the fucking, okay, this is what killed me, and now I will use this to become stronger again. It's a weird analogy, I know, but it is what we're seeing is like this idea that this is definitive in any way is just not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at, for example, to your point there about how we've changed from last season, what was our issue last season? Got a bit seesaw, a bit roller coaster, not good enough really off the ball at times. Opponents started to work out with the spaces. What was the response? Going by Declan Rice. And I think first off, the fact that a player like Declan Rice was convinced to join Arsenal, and the fact that Arsenal put the money down, just gives you that further conviction that the club is serious, that the manager is serious, that he is managing upwards properly, and he's saying, this stopped us winning the league. Let's get that player and we'll get closer. But
just on that, sorry, just to cut across you and come back to your main point, but doesn't... in some ways, if Postecoglou, for example, wants to build a squad which has players who can do that, who can bring the team forward, who can progress, and they're being asked to join a club where the fans are happy to do the Poznan with the fucking worst fucking cunts in football, I mean, does that not give players, serious players, a little bit of pause for thought? Like, what kind of organisation am I committing to here?
Yeah, absolutely. And not least, I think these things always have more impact when you're the only club on. I think if that happens on a Saturday, I think it's really different compared to like a Monday night. Like that Tottenham-Chelsea game, the hilarious 4-1,
oh, yeah,
where basically both teams lost in a PR sense. That I think it makes a massive difference when that happens on a Monday night and you're the only one on and everyone's watching. And it's the same with this City Tottenham game. This isn't hidden away in a Saturday 3 p.m. or a Saturday 5:30. Like, the world is watching. The world's got its eyes on you. I do think those midweek games make a real difference when it comes to your kind of branding, as it were. And look, bring it back to Arsenal and what they've done off the ball and things like that, and talking about the faith and the credit that Arteta's built. I mean, he made 2 risky transfers around the first 11, bringing Havertz in, who was a player who'd flattered to deceive and, had played for Chelsea. And a lot of us were looking at this completely justifiably and saying, ooh, this might be the first one that doesn't work. And it has. Like, he's cracked it. And then the one that really tested everyone was the Raya for Ramsdale kind of thing, because that was the first time, I think, that he'd really killed one of our darlings. Like,
sure,
I think a lot of us were happy to see the back of quite a lot of players who'd gone before that. And this was the first time it was like, oh, you've built a team we really liked, and we really like this guy. Yeah. And you've kind of cut his throat here. And that's a big risk. But honestly, I think most people, and there was a time earlier in the season where both of those discussions were absolutely on the table, and a lot of people didn't agree. Again, I think with justification, I'm not pointing the finger at those people, but particularly in the stadium, there was never like a movement against them. There were never like I think those players were supported in the stadium still, and I think that's down to Arteta. I think either one of those signings would have happened under Emery or latter era Wenger, and that happens after a couple of months. I think you get some groans, you get some sarcastic cheers, and stuff like that. But that didn't happen. Like, even though a lot of people clearly disagreed, I think they kept their counsel and they're like, okay, we'll support these players and we'll see how it goes. And I think both of them have paid off. And, when it comes to next season, some of the stuff that Arsenal might do, they might do something like that again. I really think the credit in the bank will be even stronger, because and listen, that doesn't immunise Arsenal against making a bad transfer or a bad decision. They still might. But if it happens in the summer or a player we like kind of, gets sacrificed or whatever, I think a lot more people will be like, okay, this happened last year and it didn't look like it was going to work, but actually it did. So once you start really building that faith up and those kind of building blocks, but I think also what those things show you, however you feel about them emotionally, is that the manager is a ruthless motherfucker.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of us really doubted that, but the extent of it was laid bare. It was just, he probably knew, I'm sure he didn't really care, but he probably knew there'd be contention over those decisions, but he was clear, like, this is what we have to do to get better. And I think I was talking about this earlier today, like the thing I feel about Arteta in terms of the affection and the gratitude I feel for him this particular moment, I don't feel like I'd like to go for a beer with him, but that's okay. Like it's almost like I'd compare it to, like, I don't know, your dad or your boss. It's like, okay, maybe I wouldn't listen, a lot of people will have beer with their dads or whatever, different relationships, but
Sure.
At a point you have that respect where it's like, okay, maybe I wouldn't like invite you around for a dinner party, but I want you in charge of my football team, because not only do I trust the quality of those decisions, I trust that you won't let anyone stand in your way. And I think the other thing we see, if we're going to keep with the Postecoglou kind of comparison, and like set pieces and things like that, and like Arteta will push every single marginal gain he can, every edge, nothing left unturned. And I love that. I love the fact that he respects everything. He respects corners. He respects defending. He respects having a guy up front who's 6'4". And sometimes you do have to hit the long ball button. Like, I love that he respects all of those sides of the game.
Yeah, and I kind of like that he... I've said this before, but I don't think Havertz was signed to play centre forward. But when he's been deployed there and done well, it's like, okay, well, this is good. Let's go with this. And it's not as if like he's flawless, Arteta. I think we talked about his communication, right? I think maybe the biggest mistake he made this season, it's not the Raya Ramsdale thing. It's what he said about the Raya Ramsdale thing. It was like, oh, I've thought, why not sub a goalkeeper? And everyone's like, what? What are you talking about? That never happens. Are you going to be some kind of trailblazer who's going to sub a goalkeeper? Turns out, no. But I think he was trying to, justify the decision and everything else. But, you're absolutely right that the respect, I think, that he garners from his players because of what he asks them to do is inextricably linked to the efficacy of what they are asked to do and the fact that it brings results and it's got end product. Like, it's hard work defending. If you're Bukayo Saka or Leandro Trossard or Gabriel Jesus or Gabriel Martinelli playing in the wide positions, Bukayo Saka, did I mention him? You've got to do a lot of work up and down that pitch. You're not the free guy because your talent is such in the opposition third that you have a free pass not to track back. You have to track back. And if you're a fullback, you've got to get forward and then you've got to get back again. And, if you're Saliba and Gabriel, you're being asked to play in a really front-footed, aggressive way, which could leave you exposed if you weren't as good as those two guys were. Midfield, we know. Forwards, we know. But ultimately, the end result is a team which wins a lot of games and scores a lot of goals and doesn't let in a lot of goals. So I think you can make demands. Football managers make demands of players all the time. But if you make demands of guys and they're like, well, this is not working. This is no good. We're not winning any games. I'm not scoring any goals. I'm getting exposed too easily at the back here. Then you pretty quickly lose those players. The old adage about a manager losing a dressing room. It might be personality, but ultimately it comes down to whether or not what they're asking the players to do brings out results on the pitch. And that is, for all the demands and all the focus on, like you say, every aspect of the game, which is clearly important, particularly when you're in a rivalry with a club like Manchester City, where you can't just ignore anything that might get you one goal, because one goal it could be the difference between winning the title and not winning the title. that is just such a fascinating aspect of how he's built what he's built. There's part of me that wonders, like, how long can it go? When you are really, really that demanding. And I think if we talk about results, I think trophies are an important thing, obviously. And I don't think this season, from an Arsenal perspective, should be defined by whether or not there is a trophy. And we can talk about final day now in a second. But, there is, I think there is something to consider in that regard, where you have to prove to players that you can keep taking those steps forward. And the closer you get, the fewer steps you have to go forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I loved what Peter Bosz, the PSV coach, said when we beat them 4-0 in September. And he talked about, before the game, we looked at Arsenal and we thought we could get them on the counter. We thought there might be gaps. And then he came away from the game and thought, why couldn't we do that? Why didn't it work out like that? And he said he watched the game back with his players and he said, like, Arsenal attack with 11 and they defend with 11. And he said, basically, when they watched it back, there were no gaps because, yes, they had loads of players forward, but they all got back again. And given, the season PSV have had has been pretty extraordinary domestically. And he said he kind of used that as inspiration for his own team. Like, look at what they're doing, look at the effort that they're putting in, and look at what it brought them, kind of thing. And that's another thing that's just really easy to love about this team. I agree with you. I think both physically and mentally, maybe in a couple of years, it's a young team, but I'm not convinced we'll see it get into its 30s together, whether that's physically or whether it's this is said about Pep a lot, right? That a lot of people can really only tolerate him for 3 or 4 years because he's quite an odd dude, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he's so intense. And I really think, in a slightly different way, but I think Arteta is similar. He's very much cut from that cloth. And, like I said, there's not a lot of levity and japes and things like that. I think, like, he's I've been in a few of his press conferences. I've been going along to, like, Jonas Eidevall's press conferences, and they let me stay for the Arteta ones. And, like, when he walks in, like, it's a bit like the headmaster's walked in.
There's a hush.
There is a hush, yeah. And don't get me wrong, a lot of that is just logistical. It's like, oh, okay, the press conference is going to start. But it feels a bit more than that. Do you know what I mean? It does very much feel like, you're playing in the playground and then the head teacher's, like, looking over your shoulder and all of a sudden, you do your tie up and tuck your shirt in. And like he really does have that vibe. And I do suspect he's taken a lot. There are other influences in his career. Hopefully one of them, fingers crossed, will do us a big favour on Sunday, although I don't think so, in David Moyes. He played under David Moyes for a long time. I am sure he soaked that up. I really am. So, yeah, I'm here for it. I think he's superbly rounded the way he's got this team playing, and I'm just loving the hell out of it.
So we're heading into the final day of the season. Like you say, we need a bit of a miracle. We need a hell of a performance from West Ham or from Man City to absolutely and utterly shit the bed in some way. Red card early on and, West Ham take advantage of that. I don't quite know how it might play out. I think the odds on it are very long. But this is the first time that Arsenal have been involved in a title challenge on the final day since 1999. We obviously won the title in 2004, won it in 2002, but those titles were won before the final day. Typically, Spurs were involved that day as well.
I was at Highbury that day.
I remember sitting in front of the TV at home in my house, and they did that thing, didn't they, Spurs, where they gave us just a little bit of hope. Did Ferdinand score the goal?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, the chant of "Come on, you Spurs" went round Highbury.
Jesus,
that day we all shamed and debased ourselves for nothing. Unfortunately,
things we'll do for a Premier League title. Eh?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not going to lie. I was a bit dejected about Tuesday night. I did kind of think that of the last like 3 games, I felt it sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it, that Spurs would do it, but on paper, like I tried to think to myself, if I was a City fan, which is the fixture I'd be most scared about, and it would be Spurs. Like,
yeah, their record,
their record there, and Tottenham away again. Objectively speaking, it's not an easy place to go. They don't lose a lot of home games, so and they did have something on it, and I didn't think the players would throw it or anything like that. So I did kind of think I didn't think it was going to happen, but I thought if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I do think West Ham have been on the beach for. I mean, they're probably sunburned by now, and their away record is utterly miserable. So it does feel, as much as to me, it felt like, particularly last weekend when we won at Old Trafford, it felt like a significant landmark to me to get to the final day.
Yeah.
And particularly if we don't lose to Everton, no one can say we bottled it or anything like that. No one can say that. This will be pretty much just the same as like several Liverpool City title races have gone, and it's just City are so strong. I do think that would be the prevailing narrative, so long as we don't do anything silly on Sunday. So I do think that, even just having that, checking the score, and by the way, I also think, talking about pushing marginals and things like that, what we did in February and March with our goal difference, but January, February kind of time with our goal difference, incredible, because that's given us more of a chance, because now it only has to be a draw so long as we win, and we could win on goal difference. Like, again, probably not going to happen, but we've given ourselves more of a chance. And I remember having a discussion with a friend of mine also called Tim, who I kind of go to games with, and before that run of games, he was like, Burnley, Sheffield United, we've got to be winning 5-6-0. And I kind of naturally have a rejection to that. I was like, no, let's concentrate on winning the games first, worry about the goal difference afterwards. He was like, no, we're taking on City. We have to win those games 5 and 6-0. And I hate it when someone else is right and I'm wrong.
Very rarely happens, Tim. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. But just doing that, I don't know whether they did it consciously. I'm sure they got to a point in each game where they were like, we can have these 5-0 here. So even doing that has just given us more of a chance, because we've got that goal difference advantage on the final day, and that might make the difference. It may do. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for doing that, not least because they were, coming off the back of, before New Year, a couple of games where we didn't look particularly dangerous in an attacking sense, and we tweak things. But even stuff like stuff that makes it real is like, there's going to be a trophy in the stadium, and I believe we can't wear the new home kit for next season, because I think there's a rule that if you're in with a chance of lifting the trophy, you have to be wearing this season's kit. So I think I'm right in saying that they can't wear next season's home kit, which I hate anyway, doing that on the last day. So
all the marketing people are like, oh, God damn it, we could win the league here. This is terrible.
But to be fair, I think it's going to be on sale. So, I mean, if we win the league, I imagine those will fly off the shelf. I'll buy 10, quite frankly. But yeah, so like even little details like that, and even little snippets like, listen, we all know why people release details about things like, or certain, not people, publications are like, Arsenal are already planning the parade, and, to get the kind of internet virgins excited and all of that. But even the fact that that's happening, like that feels nice, and it does feel because we lost to Aston Villa, so I guess in a sense we did mess up a run in, but it's not like last year where, even like the day it officially went away at Forest last year, like that did not feel like a dagger, because we knew it was gone weeks before that. So just to have that hope, and to have that thing where you're not just cheering for your own team, but you're cheering for the team playing against the team you're competing with, and stuff like that is great. And I think it will be a good experience for this team as well, because like you said, what they've showed is they've got a big capacity for learning. So taking it this far, I think will stand them, hopefully really stand them in good stead for next season. And, next season, it might be different. It might be that we go in on the final day and it might be that the pressure's really on because, we could have been going into this game as the team on top, and it could, that would have, obviously that's what we wanted and what we needed, but that would have been terrifying at the same time. So, maybe next year they get another experience where they're in it on the last day, and this will stand them in really good stead. But I'm really excited about it, and I'm intent on soaking it all up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think it's been an amazing season. I think you can look back, obviously, at various moments and think, if this had happened, if that had happened, if this hadn't happened. But, it's a 38-game season. The league has won over 38 games. And you can pick and choose all kinds of moments if you want to. But,
And you've got to look at it the other way. If you're going to do that, you've got to look at it the other way as well. You've got to say 96-minute header to win at Luton. Yeah. Declan Rice clearing one off the line at Brentford. What if that goes wide? What
Rice scoring against Man United. Exactly. These margins are so tight, and everyone listening to this, I'm sure, will have been through some difficult times at Arsenal, and we've been through difficult times as a club. We've had the end of a very successful era, a sort of an era that kind of redefined success at Arsenal to some extent, and it ended in the way it ended, and the decisions made after that were probably not the best decisions in the world, but sometimes you need to take a couple of steps backwards to go forwards again. Maybe I need to put my mouth in gear to go forwards, but you know what I mean? You have to sort of reset. And I remember thinking very clearly at the time when we'd finished 8th, right, that there's an opportunity here, as counterintuitive as it sounds. We've finished 8th. We don't have European football. This is a chance for this football club to take stock, to look properly at what's going on, what has happened, why are we here, and what needs to be done to get us back to where we all want to be. And I've never been as entitled as to think that Arsenal should win the Premier League every season or should win trophies every season, but where I do have a line is I want Arsenal to be competitive. I want Arsenal to be a good team. I don't want us to be rolled over. I want us to push the best teams. I want us to be one of the best teams. And ultimately, obviously, I want us to win. But I think you have to accept the reality of what you're living in, the normal, or the new normal, if you want to call it that, of what the Premier League is these days. You have to accept that there is something out there that is kind of monstrous and very, very difficult to beat. And to compete with them all the way through this season, to get it to the final day, to be behind this team, to really like this team and this manager and these players, and not only that, to like the way they play and to like the football that they play, I think it's been so enjoyable this season. And I'm with you. I'm ready to soak it up on Sunday. I'm ready for the miracle. But if it doesn't happen, this has been a hell of a journey this season, and I don't think it's finished yet.
No, absolutely. I remember writing a piece at the beginning of the 21-22 season on the site, and actually it was I guess it could have been considered a fairly downcast piece, but obviously the context here is that fans were coming back into the stadiums for the first time. I think it was after we'd played, we were playing West Brom away in the second round of the League Cup, which we hadn't been in nearly 30 years and all of that. And I just wrote a piece about redefining happiness as a fan, and a lot of that was about the context of coming back into stadiums after 18 months out of them, which for me was very, very difficult. Sure. It's just been an absolute staple of my life ever since I was a kid. So I was a bit okay, I don't want to take this for granted anymore. But also redefining happiness in the sense that there are clubs that are doing stuff, that's redacted, cease and desist.
115 ceases and desists. Yes, I get you.
Yeah. So, and actually, and at the time, I think the context I was coming from was Arsenal are probably not going to win the league. They're probably not going to be able to win the league while all of this is happening. So, how do I get happiness out of this, and look at this, like. Here we are, less than 2 years after. Less than 3 years after that, and we're in the title race on the final day, and we're on course to get like just 1 point shy of what the Invincibles got. I mean, it's incredible. As much as I saw progress at that point, I didn't see this coming. I didn't see us being the team that really pushes City all the way like that, and everything that entails. You know, it reminds me of that old Jurgen Klopp quote about competing with Bayern, where he said, like, for Borussia Dortmund, he said, we've got a bow and arrow. If we use it really well, we can do stuff, but Bayern has a bazooka. And that's, I mean, let's face it, the Premier League is the Bundesliga now, effectively. So, you know, for Liverpool and now Arsenal to really push City, to the massive credit of both of those clubs.
Yep.
And I think the Premier League is probably thankful that those clubs have at least given some broadcasters, you know, the opportunity to kind of do that, oh, it's the final day type thing, because as much as what City are doing isn't normal, neither's what we're doing, neither's what Liverpool have done. Like, Liverpool got 97 and 99 points, not normal. It's just there was another team who's doing something else, even less normal. So
yes.
It's great to be in that company, and I have to admit, I'm trying not to be too bitter about the Man City thing, because like the idea that we can get 89 points, take 4 points off Man City, take 4 points off Liverpool, and that's still not be enough. It rankles a bit. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a fair fight. But at the same time, there's not really much we can do about that. No, and
everyone knows the lay of the land as well. You know, there's no point. I know exactly what you're saying. I did write about this a little bit today, you know, in the context of what makes football so interesting and so great is it's like you can be beaten by a better team and you can hate that team, but you can have respect for that team or that club. And the example of Manchester United in those heady days of those incredible seasons and those rivalries, like the enmity between the clubs, the players, the managers, the sets of fans was off the charts. But I think, you know, maybe in the cold light of day, but probably at the time as well, you know, I think if you ask like rational fans, not the lunatics, but if you ask some of the rational fans, is there respect for what they do? I think it would have been there on both sides. You know, United, you know, they had a financial advantage, but why? Because they were clever and smart. It's not that they brought in an oligarch or a nation state. They were just ahead of the curve when it came to marketing and those kinds of things and their stadium. But for me, there's like zero respect for Manchester City. I can see they have incredible collective quality, incredible individual quality. Guardiola is essentially some kind of football savant. You know, he really is. You know, I know people will say he goes to all the big clubs, but, you know, where do the best guys go? They don't go to fucking Huddersfield Town. Sorry. They go to the best clubs and the biggest clubs and the clubs with the biggest budgets, but I'll just never have any kind of respect for them the way I did for United, for Liverpool back in the 80s. It's just not there.
No, and actually, in a weird way, I also think that works to City's advantage.
Yeah.
And, you know, Clive was on second captains earlier this week. He's getting around at the moment. Might have to rein him in a little bit, getting ideas above his station.
Yeah, we'll sort him out on Saturday, take him backstage and just have a quick word.
But he was talking about how, like, there are teams that, I want to say don't try against City, but the level of City's dominance is maybe convenient for them because and this was probably the case for Arsenal as well before all this. You kind of don't have to reflect too much when Man City walk away with the league title. You just kind of go, we all know why that's happening, don't we? And that translates into the games they play sometimes, where first of all, I don't think people dislike them really. I think it's apathy, and so they don't really have. Like Arsenal have London derbies and stuff like that. I think City basically they play United and that's it, really. And I think most other teams are just like, oh yeah, okay, we'll lose to. Look at Aston Villa. You Aston Villa, like, fair play, took 6 points off Arsenal. I'm not going to necessarily kill them for that. They're allowed to do that. But what did they do when they went to City recently? Rolled over, rested players, rolled over, had their tummies tickled, and that kind of makes it harder as well when you've got this kind of very bloodless team, that it's not just their quality that makes teams roll over, it's the fact that people are kind of indifferent to them, so you don't get that kind of get into them. It's a bit like, let's just get this 90 minutes out the way. City will win, they'll win the league, and we'll all just go home and do something else.
Well, let's hope that doesn't transpire on Sunday. It's a slim hope, but one I think we have to kind of hang on to. And, do we believe in karma? Do we believe in justice, the retribution of the fates? If we do, it's about time they gave a little back to Manchester City. So let's see what happens. Tim, the other thing I want to talk to you about, obviously this week, big news from Arsenal women is that Vivianne Miedema is set to leave the club. It was announced. She'll be going. Before we talk about sort of how that decision came about, you wrote about her in a profile piece, a sort of tribute piece on Arseblog News. You said, "I haven't seen a better player in an Arsenal shirt than Vivianne Miedema." Try and just sort of outline what she has brought to this football club during her time here and what made her just so special. Obviously, the last couple of seasons have been hit by injury and maybe not quite recovered from the injury or used in the right way after the injury. I don't quite know, but I think there's a post and pre-injury situation here. But what was it about her that made her so special when you think about some of the incredible players that Arsenal women have had down the years?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for like a comparison, it's very Henry, it's very Bergkamp. It's just someone comes in and in every single game is the best player on the pitch. And I think she had like a style both as a person and a footballer that really appealed, because she kind of looked like she wasn't trying most of the time. She was, but she just had that very easy style where she kind of looked like, and I'm not saying this is what happened, because I don't think that's the reality at the elite level, but she kind of looked like, I'm going to play at 50% and I'm still going to score a hat trick. So kind of thing. And she, she's got like that very, I described her in the piece as demonstratively undemonstrative in a way. So like in one respect, she's very undemonstrative, and, she'd get nominated for the Ballon d'Or and she'd say, I don't really care about these things. Like, she said to me once, like, I'm not going to the ceremony. It doesn't do anything for me. Like, kind of an anti-star like that. But as a player, just very, very often the best player on the pitch, kind of looking like she was, she was having a kickabout in the back garden, and someone who, the thing is as well in women's football that's very different from men's football, or at least it's much more pronounced. Individuals matter more because it's still, relatively speaking, a niche sport, and people come in through individuals. People see a player they like, or they watch the World Cup or something, or a Euros, and they see a player they like, and Viv is that player. And it's, the Netherlands, they won the Euros in 2017. They went to the World Cup final in 2019. She broke the Netherlands goal scoring record before her 23rd birthday. Like, the records are ridiculous. And people were watching this player and like, who does she play for? That's who I want to support. It's very common in women's football. Most people will support a team because of a player. So I don't know. I suspect you don't. I don't know if you ever look at where the downloads come from for particular podcasts. But if you look at the Arsenal Women Arsecast, I'm going to bet that Netherlands is pretty high up in terms of the people that listen to it.
Okay.
A lot of Dutch fans are Arsenal women. And that's not a coincidence. So this has been very painful for a lot of people, because a lot of people are Arsenal fans because of Viv. And so it's very painful for them to see her go and to hear. And I don't think everyone really has the full story on this. I'm not suggesting I do either, But to hear that the club didn't offer a contract and want to move in a different direction is also been quite painful for people. But the season Arsenal won the WSL in 2018-19, the season she produced was, it was Henry Invincible's standard.
Sure.
It wasn't quite single-handed, but it was close.
So, I mean, how much do we understand about why this decision came to pass? Because clearly she's an incredibly talented player. The club might want to move in a different direction. She might want to go in a different direction, try something new at a certain point in her career as well. But, the idea that when you do have a player of such talent, if you really want to be taken seriously, you should do what you can to try and hold on to that player. But of course, there has to be a willingness, for that player to continue. And I'm not saying that is it just sort of a convenient for both parties to some extent that this is a timing issue as much as anything else?
Yeah, there's some paradoxes at play. I think like the injury, she did her ACL in December 2022, and she's still not fully back from that. She's had a couple. I was always told at the time she did it that it was I think there was a little bit of meniscus damage as well, and so she's had a couple of it's a bit Gabriel Jesus. She's had a couple of clean-up operations off the back of that, so she's not fully back yet in that respect. She's kind of played for a bit, exploratory clean-up op, played for a bit, clean-up op, that type of thing. So the injury, and I don't think the injury is the reason for it. I don't necessarily think that Arsenal don't think that she can get back to her best or anything like that. There has been, even prior to the injury, I think a kind of tactical drift away from the player, in terms of she's a very, if I tell, like, she grew up a Feyenoord fan and Robin van Persie is her hero. And so that's what she's like as a forward. She's a 9, but she's a 10. She loves to get involved and kind of play. And that's not how Jonas Eidevall plays. He's very much one for structure, not much rotation of positions. And he wants his striker generally to be quite physical and to stay in the penalty area. And that's not Viv at all. And so there was this kind of compromise almost where she was moved back into a number 10 position, which she played when she was younger, and she says she prefers. She's a reluctant goal scorer, really. She says she prefers assists. So she was okay with that. Like, sure. It wasn't really working at number 9. So Arsenal bought Stina Blackstenius, moved Viv back, but it still felt a little bit of a compromise, like an uneasy compromise. And there are a few players who kind of went quite quickly when Jonas came in with this very new, very different style of play. And I think really Viv doesn't fit that style, but she's so good that you try to make it work another way. Yeah. Like a lot of other players were just sold and discarded. I know what you mean. They were sold, right? They went somewhere else. But Viv's so good that you try to make it work. And I think the injuries complicated things a little bit. Like, if she had another year on her contract, I'm sure Arsenal wouldn't be selling her. But it does feel a bit like we've had 3 seasons under Jonas Eidevall. There's been a lot of turnover of players. There's been like lots and lots happening. And I think, the identity of the team is still not quite there. And it's not just Jonas Eidevall's decision. I know that. The club are quite aligned on it. They just feel, I think, and this is me inferring a bit, that they need to rubber stamp an identity now. They need to really play kind of Jonas Eidevall football with the and I think they just feel it's come to a bit of an end. And that does happen. It happened to us with Thierry Henry. It does remind me of that situation where you've got this amazing player and it feels like a paradox to say, how are we getting rid of this amazing player? But at the same time, like when Henry went, you kind of had that, but it's time feeling, like the team does need to move on. And what's going to be painful is I think it is likely she'll go to Man City. They play a style that I think is much more suited to her. And I think that is going to be understandably painful for people.
Yeah, of course, there. And if she comes not back to life, but if, finds form and flourishes there, I mean, would it be fair to say that if perhaps there was a little more faith in Jonas Eidevall among certain sections of the Arsenal supporters, that this decision might have been greeted with obviously sadness, because she's been such a great player, and it's always heartbreaking to see one of your favourite players leave the club. But, there have been ups and downs, and there's a trophy this season, but obviously not qualifying for the Champions League, not going the distance in the title race. It raises questions and doubts among supporters. So when a decision like this is made, while there are those question marks over the head coach or the manager, like you say, this is a club decision, it seems, but he's the guy front and center. The book stops with that guy. Is that playing a part in some of the reaction here?
Absolutely it is, yeah. And I think it's been framed a bit too simply as a kind of Jonas versus Viv thing, and I don't think it's quite that simple. The other thing is as well, because she's been out for most of the last 18 months, is Arsenal have got used to playing without her. Now, a lot of supporters, I think with some justification, would say, well, hang on, the biggest reason Arsenal haven't competed for the title, they've scored 12 fewer goals than Man City, 11 fewer than Chelsea, and so and breaking down low blocks has been a real issue this season. And so a lot of people, I think very justifiably, kind of saying, well, why are we getting rid of this player? But, I think there's a bit more to it than that. But one thing is for sure, has to work. Like at the moment, it's heated. And it's we did a podcast on it last week. I did one with Aidan Gibson, who does our kind of match reports on Arseblog News. And listen, I won't lie, I knew what was coming, but I didn't report it as such because I didn't feel it should come from me, from us. I felt like that should come from like her and the club, and some players have a status where I think that's kind of the right thing. But we talked around it, and we talked around it in as neutral kind of terms as we could. But like some of the blowback we got was quite severe, just for like even like surfacing some of the things I've talked about here, like the tactical drift away from the player. There's a lot of, and I'm not saying this pejoratively or critically, there's a lot of emotion around this, and that will die down a bit over the summer. But one thing's for sure, the scrutiny is going to be there right from the off next season, and she's probably going to be in a Man City shirt. And if that goes well, you remember what it was like every time Van Persie scored for Man United.
I do,
and football reasons trended every time. That's potentially in the post, and that is absolutely out there. I would say on the club's part, again, being objective, this is a ballsy decision, for better and or worse. They've made a big call here. And I think on one hand, the fact that they're prepared to make that bigger call shows like an element of clarity and faith in what they're doing. But they know that people are going to be waiting for this to not go right. And if it doesn't, it's probably going to get relatively unpleasant quite quickly. But I think one thing I did know that the club wanted to communicate this ahead of the final game on Saturday, which is at home to Brighton, because they'd really like that to be a celebration of the player and a thank you. And they wanted to do it early in the week so people had a bit of time to process it.
Sure.
And they're kind of doing a lot of departure announcements this week. I'm reasonably hopeful we might get Stina Blackstenius contract confirmation, new contract confirmation later in the week, which might, it might for some people, it might sugar the pill a little bit. You know how these things go, do the bad news first. Kind of thing. So I know the club wanted to get out ahead of this and make the final day on Saturday a celebration of this player, and whatever people's views on it, whatever else has happened, she absolutely deserves that. No question about it.
Yeah, and the departure, is not anywhere near as contentious as Van Persie, when you make that comparison. Will she start this game on Saturday, or will it be a case that, she comes off the bench and finishes the game, or is it a starter and comes off after an hour and gets the applause kind of thing? How do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, this is one of the first questions on my list for Jonas's press conference on Friday.
All right.
Because and I don't know anything about this. I don't have any information on it. But she didn't play at the Man City game, and we were given the reason. She'd had a bit of a knee injury, her knee had flared up a little bit, and there was a bit of an odd situation away at Everton where she was on the bench and she wasn't going to come on, and then Everton equalised in the 93rd minute, and then they were going to throw her on. And I mean, something must have happened in the build up to that, because I don't think you voluntarily don't put Vivianne Miedema on in a game unless, some kind of footage has emerged as well of them, arguing on the touchline when he was going to bring her on and stuff like that. So, but she has to play some part in this game. Like my absolute preference would be for her to start and get that ovation to come off. But listen, I might have got it all wrong. Maybe her knee did flare up and that's why she couldn't play in the Man City game. And maybe she can't do 90 minutes. Maybe she can do 20, 30 minutes. But all eyes will be on that, certainly. And I know Jonas isn't going to tell me outright, yes, I'm starting her, but hoping to get some kind of indication. All
right. Well, look, we'll look forward to hearing from Jonas and your questions and seeing what happens at the weekend. And hopefully it is a successful and emotional send-off for Vivianne Miedema, because her contribution to the club over the years has been immense. All right, we had better leave it there. I'll see you at the weekend for a title party, I hope. And for now, we'll leave it there. Tim, as ever, thanks a million.
My pleasure as always.
Thank you very much indeed to Tim. You can find him on Twitter. He is at Stillmanator, And of course, he brings you the best coverage of Arsenal women anywhere over on Arseblog News, our dedicated section to the Arsenal women's team. From match reports, post-match reaction, press conferences, transfer stories and lots more. So make sure you've got that bookmarked if you're a fan of the Arsenal women's team. Now, I told you we had a book to give away, and today, the time of recording, it is the 15th of May, which is 20 years to the day that Arsenal completed a Premier League season unbeaten. Goals from Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira, giving us a 2-1 win over Leicester to secure, well, not to secure anything, because the title was already won. We'd won that at White Hart Lane, but to achieve something unique and achieve something that remains unique in the annals of top flight football in the modern era, in the Premier League era. No other team has done it. No other team has gone through an entire season without losing a game. Although Arsenal this season did win more games than the Invincibles did in their title winning season, which is, I guess, kind of cool in its own way. Maybe it'll be even cooler on Monday if, the whole Pep Bruce Willis thing comes to pass. You know what I'm talking about. But to win a copy of this book, we've got 3 prizes. We've got a copy of the book and a badge, and then we've got 2 badges to give away as well. All you need to do to enter is send an email to competition@arseblog.com, competition@arseblog.com, and just tell me, who did Arsenal beat in the first game, the first Premier League game of that season? Just tell me who we beat. Email your answer to competition@arseblog.com. And we've got a discount code for the book if you'd like to buy your own copy. You can go to the link which is in the show notes. It's a legendspublishing.net. You'll find the link in the show notes. You can use the code GOLD20, that is GOLD20, to get 20% off. Can't say fairer than that, can you? So send your competition entries. If you'd like the book before that, you can just buy it with 20% off using that code GOLD20. Right. That is just about that for today's show. We will preview the Everton game as usual over on Patreon. We'll do that for you on Friday afternoon. I will be in London this weekend. Of course, we've got our live show with our good friends from Arsenal Vision podcast that is taking place at Ali Pali, the Alexandra Palace Theatre, on Saturday evening. The show starts at 7:30 if you've got tickets. I think doors are 6 or 6:30, but keep an eye on our Patreon. We'll update you on there. We're looking forward to seeing lots of you at that live show, and also looking forward to seeing many of you around and about on Sunday ahead of our final game against Everton, ahead of, during, after. Please do say hello if you spot me anywhere. It'd be great to stop and have a chat and talk about the season that was, a season that, even if it doesn't get to exactly where we want it to get to with the final result on Sunday, has still been a lot of fun. A lot of enjoyment has been had from the football we've played, and it's been a real pleasure and a real privilege as well to be able to cover this season in the way that we have on Arseblog, not just on the Arsecast, but on the Arsecast Extra with James as well, in our Patreon podcast with Lewis and Phil and all the team. And I do hope we've helped enhance your enjoyment of what has been a really, really fun season from Arsenal on the pitch. So I just want to take a moment to thank you so much again for reading the blog, reading the news, downloading the podcasts, commenting, sharing, all of it, whether you're on Patreon, not on Patreon, just being part of this journey this season with all of us here at Arseblog. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed it. Let's keep everything crossed for the kind of miracle that I think we will need to win the title. But football is weird. Football is strange. Football can throw up some random stuff at times. It seems unlikely. Manchester City have taken a lot of the jeopardy out of football by just being this horrendous winning machine that sucks the life, the very soul out of the game. But maybe there's something in there for us. Let's hope so. Even the most sinister, apparently unbeatable movie villains come undone in the end. So let's see. For now, take it easy. Hope to see some of you at the weekend. We'll talk to all of you again next week at some point. I'm not quite sure what the schedule is going to be. I guess it all depends on what happens and when exactly I get back to Dublin and what state I'm in when I get back to Dublin after what could be, either way, I think, a weekend where there might be a drink or two taken, as we say here in this part of the world. Okay, have a good one, folks, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye. We are just seconds away from kickoff here at the Toilet Duck this afternoon, but as has become tradition, Tottenham's #1 brass instrument playing fan, Timmy Trumpet, has scaled the stadium and he will serenade the home fans with the Spurs theme tune.